Good morning, everyone. I'm Vidhi Sharma and your MC for today. We're very pleased to welcome you all to the 14th ReBitVlogs Majlis. Before we go ahead, here's a look at the agenda for the hour. We'll first have the welcome note, after which we're going to introduce our panelists. Then we'll move forward with the panel discussion, where the teams will put forward their views, the experts will share their insights, and the teams will put forward their questions, after which the experts will respond. We'll move on with the audience question and answer session and end with the closing. Kindly do note that the entire session is being photographed and video recorded for educational and promotional purposes. Now, to tell us a bit about ReBitVlogs, I would like to invite Dr. Zeenat Khan, the assistant professor here at UOWD and founding creative mind behind the Majlis, to tell us a bit about it.
All right. It's really exciting, guys, because this is the 14th edition of ReBitVlogs session that we are organizing today. This is an innovative platform that was actually initiated in 2017 to engage students, such as yourselves, in discussions on pressing responsible business and technology use issues. It's a link between students and academics, such as the amazing ones that we have in our panel today. Sometimes we do have industry experts, government and non-government officials. Every session, we try to highlight an area of responsible IT use or business and leadership, such as the one that we are doing today, in order to shed light on the importance of all aspects of human life, technology, business that impact everything around us. Along with me, the masterminds for this amazing program was Professor Mario Fernando, who is the Director for Center for Cross-Cultural Management and Professor of Management at Wollongong, and Ms. Vinita Matthew, who's the founder of Sustainable Minds Dubai. And of course, we've got amazing Vidhi Sharma, who has been an instrumental member of the organizing team in shaping the program to be what it is today. Our program has also won twice the Council for Australia-Arab Relations grant to establish an exchange program between Australia and UAE. So we've actually welcomed students from Australia in 2018. We were supposed to take students from Dubai, but then COVID happened, so that became an online engagement in 2021. We are hoping to continue the student exchange program, so as members of class that have now participated in this ReBitVlogs program, you will become eligible to apply once we do have that grant back and up and running. Thank you so much. Over to you, Vidhi.
Thank you, Dr. Zeenat. The theme for this Majlis is Ethics versus Business, the IT Project Manager's Dilemma. Ethical responsibilities of a project manager, as defined in the PMI guidelines, focus a lot on the black and white issues such as conflict of interest. While all that is very well, a trained and certified project manager is also duty-bound to do whatever is in the best interest of the project at all times. Every too often, we find project managers who are otherwise on the correct side of the guidelines display one or more of the following symptoms: not pulling their weight on projects, allowing them to drift, abdicating all responsibility to the sponsors and senior managers, accepting their brief as doing only coordination and clerical work, not really driving projects, being too willing to accept whims and fancies of the most influential or the most vocal stakeholders, allowing them to hijack projects, failing to report the true picture to all stakeholders. The bigger the project, the more opportunities arise for people or companies to compromise their ethics in an effort to bring the project in on time and on budget. However, when project managers and other stakeholders turn a blind eye to questionable activities, the results are often disastrous. Blown budgets, legal trouble, and even criminal charges are all too common in today's business environment. From horrible working conditions at OpenAI's African offices to the disastrous case of the Denver airport, baggage system failure to the St. Francis Dam disaster of 1928 that killed hundreds, decisions by project managers can have a crucial impact on projects, society, and the environment. So how do we go forward in balancing project managers' responsibilities? What are the answers to these dilemmas? Are these issues real ethical issues in IT and businesses? This invited panel sifts through the sands of ethical dilemmas faced by governments, organizations, customers, and societies around the world, their consequences, and explores the way forward. Our panelists for today are Dr. Kamal Jafar is an associate professor at the Faculty of Engineering and Information Sciences, University of Wollongong in Dubai. He teaches the program for the Master of Information Technology Management, Master of Engineering Management, and the Master of Engineering Asset Management. Dr. Jafar is a corporate consultant and a trainer in project management. Dr. Hazem Gouda is Associate Professor at the University of Wollongong in Dubai and currently teaches Materials in Design, Physics 030, Project Management, Project Implementation, and Outsourcing at undergraduate and postgraduate level. He has a keen interest in water science, sustainable water management, catchment management, asset management, project management. In order to select our student panelists, we had an initiative on campus. The storytelling and poster competition at UOWD took place this semester. 3 winning teams were chosen based on judges' scores. Each team selected a speaker who are joining our industry panelists. Finally, the panel is moderated by Dr. Zeenat Reza Khan, and the Twitter and question and answer will be handled by myself. Now, with a minute to organize the panel stage, we will move to the next segment of today's Majlis, the panel discussion. May I please request everyone that once the discussion Majlis begins, please switch off your phones and do not walk around or move in and out of the auditorium as we will be filming the session. Do not forget to use Twitter to ask questions.
Okay. All right. So we do have the mics that we will use, yeah? Okay, so it's really exciting for us to be doing this session face-to-face because a number of these panel discussions for a good number of years were online because of the pandemic. So we are really excited that we are able to bring this face-to-face to your class this semester. The topic is really, again, something very cutting edge. We're looking at ethics versus businesses. We're looking at the project manager's dilemma, how they're able to manage and balance both ethical duties and at the same time business duties. We all know we are in a business to make money. We want to do projects so that we can bring in profit to a company. But at the same time, there is always a dilemma of where do we draw that line between pushing people too much, not pushing people, taking money, not taking money, etc. So I think the panel today is going to be really exciting. And I will start with our students first. The one who is going to be talking about the company. Let's hear from you first. No, the employers, yes.
Good morning to everyone present here. So today I'll be speaking about the plight of the employees that were working on the Cyberpunk 2077 project. The Cyberpunk 2077 is a video game which was developed by a studio called CD Projekt Red. It was released on 10th December 2020. The employees working on Cyberpunk 2077 were extremely overworked. Initially, the CEO claimed that there wouldn't be a need to work overtime. But it changed as time went by. The pressure of releasing the game on time built up, and the managers started to pressurize the employees to work overtime. Some of the main factors that affected the employees included lack of communication, unrealistic deadlines, overworking, and burnouts. CD Projekt Red enforced mandatory 6-day working hours for many months prior to the game's release in order to meet the deadlines and complete the game on time. And this in turn resulted in crunch culture, which is still prevalent in today's gaming industry. They had to work overtime due to the ambitious scope of the project. The employees reported to have experienced anxiety, depression, and other physical and mental health illnesses. Another factor that affected the employees were lack of communication. The employees reported that there was a lack of communication and transparency from the management during its development of the project. This led to a lot of confusion and uncertainty among the employees themselves. In the case of Cyberpunk 2077, the employees were overworked, and this led to the exploiting of ethics and morality by exploiting their employees. I would like to conclude by saying that the employees' health and well-being contributes massively towards the project's success. Therefore, companies should take proactive steps in order to support their employees. Thank you.
Okay, so I think it's very interesting that you came up with this particular case study on Cyberpunk 77 because it does show us that in crunch moments, managers do kind of cross that line that we've just been talking about. And they do want to just looking at the bottom line, which is trying to get that software or that project completed at all costs. It's also really nice to see the kind of highlights that you brought in terms of the impact that it has, those kind of projects have, like the crunch times have on employees, not just in terms of the physical, but also the mental well-being of employees get affected. So before we come to, of course, our experts, I'm going to just move on to the next speaker, who's going to be telling us about the company's perspective.
So, good morning, everyone. Today, I would like to talk about companies' responsibility in ensuring ethics in project management. So, ethics is an essential aspect in any business. So, businesses need to prioritize ethics in all areas of operation, including project management. In order to do this, there's a PMI code of ethics, which has four main pillars, being responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty. So businesses have the responsibility to ensure that these PMI code of ethics are being followed while a project is being made, because they are the approvers of the decisions made by the project manager. Not only that, they're also the face of the project. So if a project fails to follow ethical practices, their reputation gets damaged, and they're the one who has to deal with the consequences. So now I'd like to talk about an example where the companies did not follow ethical practices in project management and what all consequences they had to deal with. So now I want to talk about Equifax. So Equifax is a credit reporting agency. So you could imagine the amount of sensitive data that they had. So disregarding that, while they were making the project, they used outdated systems and weak security measure. So they had a vulnerability in their web application, which led to it being hacked, and there was a data breach. So, and they did not patch this fault in time, even though there was a fix. And their response to this data breach was also very inadequate, because they delayed the notification to the customers as well. It took them 2 months to tell them that there was a data breach. So what happened was Equifax ended up damaging their reputation, and they had to pay compensation to all 147 million people whose data was breached. So in order to avoid ethical scandals, companies can do several things, actually. They can have strict policies and procedures ensuring ethical practices. They can have transparency between them and the customers. They can take accountability for their actions as well. They can have privacy protection steps taken. So this case study is not only the fault of cybersecurity, it was also an ethical malpractice. So company should have the responsibility to ensure ethical practices in project management. Thank you.
Okay, that's a completely different viewpoint, I think, we've gotten from the previous case study. Here, we aren't really talking so much about the employees, but rather the external stakeholder, which is the customer, and the kind of responsibility project managers have towards these stakeholders as well. It's really interesting because you chose this case. It shows us that something when we think about data breaches, we don't necessarily think about us, the customers, as the victims, because we are not necessarily seeing the actual cost involved in what happens when there is a data breach in a project or an organization. So it was really interesting to hear that side of the project management issue. Moving on to the last student speaker.
Good morning, and I'm talking about the role of government in business and ethics. So I got the case study of like Therac 25, which is basically a machine that is used for radiation treatment to treat cancer patients. It was initially thought to be a success, but then it was a major fail because of how it led to the death of 6 patients, and this was all because, not just because of the software design, which was initially blamed for. It also had to do with the poor reporting standards of the FDA, which is on the government side. So it all started off like because the AECL, which is the company that developed this machine, failed to inform the government about their software design or about their testing procedures or anything. So when the FDA got the design, they just assumed that it was a minor modification to the previous technology. So they did not necessarily go through all the testing procedures all over again. They just blatantly passed the product and launched it into for commercial use. After the incidents were reported, FDA didn't take proper steps to manage the incident or to stop the machines from being used. They just recommended to recall the machines, but they didn't really shut them down. And then by the time they did shut it down, it was too late because people died. And then it so happened that also people were misinformed about what the product was doing because they weren't aware of what the machine was doing. Not just the patients, but also the healthcare providers and the professionals were unaware of the use of the machine because it was told to be a redesign of the previous technology. And what the government should have done in such a situation was to have a risk management policy in place. So even if this incident were to take place today, they should have a plan that should be executed as soon as such an incident takes place. And what risks can you mitigate, such as shut it down or not pass or have stronger testing procedures. And also the fact that there was very weak communication between the stakeholders, such as the AACL and the FDA, or even the patients, because the patients weren't aware of what they were getting into. And there's also the privacy of the patients, because after the incidents came out, there were pictures of the patients, of how they were burned. So there is obviously the data security and the privacy of the patients that should be respected. And there should be policies in place for that. Also, the training is very important. When there's a error in the machine, the healthcare professionals should have reporting standards where they can report errors and give immediate feedback to the company so that they can make changes as soon as possible. So these are some of the things that need to be put in place by the government so that incidents like these don't happen. And also there's obviously responsibility on the companies and the healthcare professionals, but you shouldn't simply blame the software designer for the error in the software or just neglect the fact that the government or the company ignored what was more important for the design.
Okay. Again, a very different viewpoint, I think, from the previous two speakers. And I think this gives us a really holistic understanding of how deep an issue ethical balance is. It doesn't just lie on the shoulders of the project manager, but also not, again, the company, but also the government or any kind of regulatory body or organization that is in charge of ensuring quality. And again, Therac 25, I think, is a fantastic example that brings to light what happens when government or regulatory bodies are not up to date with how they can and should monitor safety when projects are concerned, particularly projects, for instance, in the healthcare sector. So thank you so much, students. We will come back to you guys. But at this stage, I'll probably start with Dr. Kamal. So Dr. Kamal, we've heard three very different cases from the students on the different types of projects, different types of issues that exist, and who they think should be responsible in each case. So maybe we will start with the first case, which was about the cyberpunk, the gaming and the crunch culture. What are your thoughts on projects like this?
Well, in general, whenever we talk about projects and assets.
Switched on. Yeah.
So in general, whenever we talk about assets or project in general, what's assets? We go back to the definition of assets. Is deviating from a standard. Who defines a standard? So
right.
Who defines a standard? Usually it varies. Society can define standard, organization can define standard, governance can define a standard. That's why in project management, and since we are talking about project management here, we have a professional body who define a standard. And the reason for we adopting a professional body, because we need to make sure processes, including related to ethics, are being met. So when I'm not meeting the project time, am I ethical or am I not ethical? So here, the liability of who is responsible become very serious here. And here comes the debate. Is it the fault of the team who didn't do a good work to finish the project, or is it the fault of the organization when they had the crunch? They kept on pushing the people to go ahead and deliver on time. That debate will stay for ever. I don't reckon I'm going to take a side, because for you to take a side, you have to have more in-depth knowledge. And here we come to the concept of agility in IT project. But when you're talking about agility, it means you're giving more flexibility and decision-making to empowering the people inside your organization to go ahead and be flexible in terms of applying processes related to the organization. So again, that as well can contribute to the problem. But in general, I go back to an example by Boeing CEO. So can I elaborate?
Yes, please.
So Boeing CEO at a certain time, they hire IT project portfolio manager, higher than a project manager. So at that time, Boeing, whenever you hire a professional, you trust that he's going to bring the knowledge area that we talk about in project management, and he's going to enrich the project to reaching objectives. So Boeing had multiple projects and programs going at the same time. Some of them fail, some of them succeed. So the key question is the following. Why some projects fail and some projects succeed, and all of them are under the same umbrella?
Yes.
So the CEO of Boeing came to a sense, I cannot blame people. I need to blame myself because I haven't set the proper processes to make project successful. So from that time, Boeing decided that from now on, we are responsible for ethical processes, for time processes, for any kind of a process you are going to follow. If you follow it and you fail, or you don't, or you deviate from the target, it's our responsibility. So again, to take a side, I would say it's the organization who's responsible to very clearly set the standard, make sure that people are aware about it, so when they cross it, they know where, if they've done an ethical or not ethical.
I think it's a very fascinating viewpoint that you've brought in, because you're saying it's not just the employee, and we shouldn't just look at the employee because they offshot, let's say, the time, and then kind of hit the triples constraint, but rather that we've got these standards. Why weren't those standards followed to begin with? So then the ownership and the responsibility, the onus goes on the portfolio manager, the IT manager who is there, and it's their bigger responsibility. Just going back to you, because you brought up this case, what are your thoughts in this case on when somebody says that, oh, it's not the employees, but rather the project manager who has to take the onus or responsibility?
Okay, so in the case of Cyberpunk, the employees were overworked to such an extent, people had to work 100 hours per week. So if the project manager set a standard of guidelines in the beginning, the employers could just follow that, but they didn't set a guideline for the employees to just follow that.
Yep, absolutely. So with that, I come to Dr. Hazem. Same case study, let's delve into from your perspective in terms of what we've heard from the case study and from Dr. Kamal.
This is very interesting, actually. From my experience, what is happening, or this, overworking people in projects started to happen after the credit crunch in 2008. So what has happened at this era? Because I was working in one of the big consultancy in the UK at the time, and you can see people being made redundant. So big corporates started to take advantage of the existing employee by giving them more work and taking this advantage of this, credit crunch. So people were really overworked, but they were actually doing it because they feel like there is insecurity that if they leave the job, they will not be able to find any jobs. So this is one situation which we consider this is unethical, okay? There are other situations which I was in, okay, and I was just working in a project here in Abu Dhabi, and I was flying from UK, coming, working maybe from 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock in the evening. Still, I'm overworking, okay, in this project, but I'm enjoying it because it's a challenging project. So we are all as a team, we were flying over, staying here for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, working hard, going back to UK, still working hard in this project, but we know we've got a target, so we enjoy what we're doing. So in this case, we can say that this is, for me, it's not unethical, it's ethical, because there is some enjoyment. So it depends on the project manager, it depends on the situations which you have. This is a different perspective here. Okay, so you have really to think about it from this point. Is this something which the people are doing it because they have to do or they love to do? Okay, this is number one. Number two, if you look from the project management perspective again, you are, as a project manager, you are responsible for your team. You have to look after your team. If you are not looking after your team, your project is going to fail. This is for sure. Even if you give them work to work 24/7, they will, in front of them, they will still, exist in the office. They will work 24/7, but they will not achieve what you want to achieve because they don't put their heart on it. The other thing which we should consider, it's not only about project management. In the West, the health and safety is a priority for people. Okay, so from health and safety perspective, this is not acceptable. If someone goes and complain, actually he can, sue the company. He can get more money from the company than what he is earning for 2-3 years. Yes, it's true. I mean, if you prove it, that's it. It's finished. The company reputation is gone. The money which you are trying to save for the project is gone. And your reputation as a project manager is gone because you will actually lose the job and you get out and that's it. It's finished. So when you think, in conclusion, what I want you to learn from this, that it's not ethical is about, how to treat human being the way you want to be treated. Yeah. This is a conclusion. So whenever you are in a situation, you're managing project, you're assessing project, you're working for a project, you should actually think that, is this guy who's managing the project, or I'm the one who's managing the project, am I really doing a good job? So people can come later to me and say, we would like to work with you, or people will just, once they finish the project, they don't want to see you again.
Yes.
Yeah, it's true. So we need really to be acting like a human. There are skills which you need to have as a project manager. I don't say that, you have to be really soft. No, you have to be firm, but at the same time, you have to be, looking after the team. Because without the team, you are not a project manager. You are a project manager with the people who are working for you.
Oh, that's a fantastic viewpoint. I think I want to also maybe ask you this. We, in fact, just talked about how families can be a stakeholder for a project team. Right? What are your thoughts on that? Maybe Dr. Kamal first and then Dr. Hassan.
Stakeholder in general, PMP looked at project, all professional body looked at the problem of how to integrate properly the stakeholder. So when it comes to stakeholder and you have part of your family as a stakeholder, directly there's a conflict of interest. By itself, it triggers a lot of ethical issues. So again, it's not a comfortable situation I would like to be in because fairness will not be there, no matter how fair you are. So in that case, the best recommended practice would be to nominate someone of your team member or team leader or project manager to lead the project. So again, family mean conflict of interest. That should be very clear in the standard of the company. You cannot manage a project and you have members of your family on
in the team itself. Absolutely. What about if, as a project manager, I have a team, let's say, of 20 people? Do I consider my family and their families in the equation when we are deciding on time, scope, and resources? And how would that look?
Depends. That's why that go back to identifying who is your stakeholder. So we usually look at direct and indirect stakeholder. Right. If your member of your family are indirect or direct stakeholders, still you need to involve them in the process
Right.
of your time management or time planning, definitely.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Hazem, your thoughts on both the situations?
Yeah, I think I will actually agree with Dr. Kamal on what he said. But sometimes, even if you have got a family member, okay, in your team, it has both sides. It can be, really harsh on him because you have to show the team that you are not giving him a favor or her a favor. So this means it's not going to be good for him or her. Or it's going to be, just you are going to be soft on her, so people will just say, okay, you see, because I mean, she is or he is a relative of the project manager. So in this case, you try to avoid as much as you can. Sometimes you cannot. Sometimes you work in projects and you have to take one. It can be one of the family members with you. Well, in this case, you have really to be clear about what is the rule, what is the delivery for each one, and you have to treat everyone equal. Because, I mean, we are in real life, and
Yes.
it happens. What was the other thing?
The other thing is the team in itself, but the team's family members, and how does that factor into when you're thinking about time, scope, and
The
resources?
time and scope, yes. If you, as Dr. Kamal said, we have direct and indirect, okay? Indirect stakeholders, by all means, all our family members can be indirect stakeholders. So it's, we cannot avoid this as well.
Yes.
As direct one, yes, we can, you have to adjust sometimes. It depends on the situation. You have to adjust the schedule, the plan, and so on. It all depends on the project. You cannot really, say that this is, we can do it, we cannot do it. Yeah, so it's from project to project, it will be different.
Different. It differs from project to
Difference,
project.
yeah.
Fantastic. Coming back to the second case study that we looked at, now we're talking from the company's perspective, right? Like when you do have crunch moments where the deadlines are not being met, or like in this case, there's a data breach and you're not informing clients because you don't want to lose your reputation. She's already mentioned that yes, companies do have those ethical responsibilities, but how do you truly really balance that bottom line versus what is your responsibility to your stakeholders? Dr. Kamal, maybe perhaps.
Again, you learn in management, stakeholder and customer are always right. So at the end, you are going to be blamed. And whenever it comes to data breach, that means you haven't integrated proper security levels in your company to manage. And especially when it comes to projects related to healthcare, that would be a killing factor for any organization to have a problem like that. That's why when it comes to IT project, we concentrate heavily on governance and IT security. Those are top level in any company that work in IT project. We look at governance. When you're talking about governance, are all the procedures that make sure data cannot be breached, all the system is well integrated, and you're going to lower level when it comes to risk. So again, when it comes to that scenario, definitely it go back to the organization. You cannot blame stakeholder for it.
Right. So, Dr. Hazem, thoughts?
I agree with Dr. Kamal again, but there is one thing here which we need to do in these kind of projects actually. You need to have an updated checklist which for auditing the system. And this is what companies are sometimes missing, especially in the IT industry. Things are changing and evolving every minute. So what you need to have as an organization, this is not a project manager, issue. It is an organization issue. So the organization should be continuously updating and assessing the system which they are responsible for. So if anything happens ethically, it is actually the organization responsibility. That's why they have to pay a compensation.
Right.
And in most cases, it happens. I mean, it happened with Amazon and was it Amazon? I think happened.
Latest last year, yeah.
So it's with all this organization, it's possibly happen. So we need to learn, and we need always to think about how can we protect our data, and learn from this case study to another cases. It's not necessary to be in the IT, it can be in other things, like oil and gas, things which has high risk for people.
Now, it's very interesting that you're saying that there needs to be a checklist. Companies need to keep this as a priority. Let's say it hasn't happened, and now they're at that crunch moment, right, where an incident has happened. So the project manager or the company has not been able to manage. In that case, given, of course, companies are in the business of making money, how do you consolidate between making money, ensuring your bottom line is met, versus the ethical standards and meeting those standards?
Again, that depends as well on the line of business you are.
Right.
So sometimes making money, you have to put it aside because the image of your organization, even not only the image of of your organization, as well the security of your people might be on the stake. Imagine you have a data breach for a lot of sensitive information related to your stakeholder. In that case, definitely time, money wouldn't be a concern to me. I would try to minimize, if I'm in a decision maker, I would try to see how to minimize that risk, mitigate it as much as possible. Definitely, I will not be able to exclude it because it did happen, but that needs to be part of the lesson learned in project management, that we need to take it abroad and look from the higher level of the hierarchy of the organization to the lowest level. How can we avoid that at next time?
Absolutely. Just going back to you, from what you have now heard from our experts, what are your thoughts now on the kind of ethical guidelines that you just researched, and how far do you think they're really applicable?
Okay, so after what I've heard, I completely agree with the companies having updated checklists, because if they do have that, they would avoid using outdated systems, which led to the data breach that happened. So I believe that it was the company's fault and not the project manager's fault. But then my question is, when the data breach that happened, the company had to pay the compensation. But in similar situations, when like the doctor said, when the project manager loses their job and their reputation gets tarnished, even though it wasn't their fault, do you think it's fair that, the project manager's reputation got damaged?
Instead of the company, you mean? So the company makes the project manager a scapegoat?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Maybe Dr. Hazem?
Bear in mind something. In this case, it's not gonna be the project manager. It's gonna be the one who is responsible for this data protection, or the department which is responsible for the data protection. They might give me that. They might put him as a scapegoat, but it's not ethical. It's not right, because it's happening, and I doubt they will do it now unless he has got some rules and guidelines and he didn't follow it. So this is the only situation. Otherwise, if they do, it means it's really not ethical.
I think she's really brought up a valid point, and I'll probably shift that to now Dr. Kamal, about this culture of scapegoating project managers when something does eventually go wrong in a project. What are your thoughts on something like that situation happening?
Well, again, always the weakest link in any process is going to break.
Right.
And in project, the weakest link who is responsible in front of stakeholder is the project manager. So if you take statistics, 80% of the time, the project manager is going to be blamed for any variation, and variation here, name it, okay? So again, Dr. Hazem mentioned, it's unethical, but it do happen. Someone has to be, to get blamed. The only way you cannot blame him is to try to protect him. The only way you protect him by making sure it's very clear who's responsible, who's accountable, when he's accountable, and that needs a very tedious process to do it, that on a second you are recording what's happening, not exactly recording as visual, but I mean recording what's happening in terms of decision making, and then you can start blaming who's responsible, who's not. But
Right.
always in front of stakeholder, it's the project manager who will be responsible.
Now, just shifting gear a little bit, I think most of the examples we've been talking about are about multi-dollar companies that do weather any kind of misfortune that comes their way, whether it's Amazon or Nike or a whole lot of other examples that we have seen. But when we talk about smaller companies, who are not multinational corporations, who might be regional or not even regional, haven't even managed to go outside of geographical locations, do they also fall under the same criteria of ethical guidelines and mandates and responsibilities of project managers, or does it actually depend on the size of the company?
Again, we go back to the same debate. Framework of project management, including the ethical segment of it, it varies from one organization to another. And what defines a good process or a good framework is when your client is happy. So no matter what unethical things you do inside the organization, if your client is happy, is that good or bad? So many organizations actually, what's ethical for you is not ethical for them. Again, this is a debate that can go for forever. Hala, family businesses, small organization, and we are living in a globalization effect now. You're going to deal with suppliers. You're going to definitely team up with other logistic company or other service provider. So for you to be able to talk the same language, you need to adopt processes that are equal or generally being applied across different segments. For that reason, definitely I would recommend small businesses to start adopting, certain framework which is adoptable by other organizations.
Dr. Hazem, your thoughts?
Yeah, I will tell you my thoughts actually. in the West, okay, in the UK and West, the small companies are acting more ethically with their employees than the big companies. Big corporates sometimes are very aggressive. Small ones, they look after the stuff because they know that these stuff are their assets.
Right.
So if you want really to be treated well, to start with a small company and then move up to big corporates. The standards, it's this different, but we have minimum level of applied ethics in both corporate and small. But what makes one is better than the other, has more retention for staff, is the way they implement and the way they put more efforts into the ethics with their employees and the way they treat not only ethics with employees, even with the clients. Because sometimes in industry, you are working in some areas, you can actually cheat the client. The client, still, he's coming to you because you are expert in the area. You can give him a shortcuts. You can, many things can be done in this area. So if you are straightforward, you are clear, you are ethical with them, this means that you are actually having a return customer in the future. So this is more.
Fantastic. I think now that we've talked about large companies and smaller sized companies, then I guess the bigger question comes back to what the last speaker said about governance. Who actually ultimately holds that responsibility, or who holds these companies responsible when something goes wrong? What are these standards and who decides these standards? Now, the example we talked about was Tarak 25 and how FDA kind of failed in their work job in ensuring that the approval that they were giving for a engineering device like this was foolproof and was not going to be causing any kind of damage, but that did lead to, unfortunately, 6 people dying from overdose. So what are your thoughts, maybe Dr. Hazem, we'll start with you, on the role of the government when it comes to managing companies?
I will tell you, this is interesting case study actually. I think the whole system, although this is happen in the US, and USs are very good in response to anything relates to human health, and I can tell you they are one of the best, maybe after Japan, and there are other countries which may be better. They will react better to these kind of situations. So in this situation, you cannot really, the blame will go to the government, will go to the standards which they have used, and the ways you're gonna treat this in the future. But you cannot really say this is a project manager fault, or you cannot blame the project manager, because they've done the project, they already delivered the equipments, and the equipment didn't work well, so the government didn't really put the right standards. People who invented this equipment as well, they didn't do the right tests. So thank God this has happened in the US, because in this case, the patient who just suffered from this treatment, they will get compensation by law from the government and from the company. So, but the thing, how can we learn from this? Where are the lessons we are going to learn? How we are going to implement this on other projects as well? This is important. And again, it depends from country to country, how they respond. But there is nothing we can, just say that this should be done, because it's different. Okay?
Fantastic. Dr. Kamal?
Whenever you come to corporate level, who shape policy in the world are market leaders. And especially in the healthcare industry, there are big players that influence a lot of government regulations.
Right.
They are part of the decision making and shaping the policy related to government regulation. And for that reason, again, this is a problem. Always unions and societies try to fight, try to integrate the new policies related to health safety, but their role would always be a small role compared to the market leader who is leading big corporation and the influence, the power of money. Here we're talking. So again, to be specific and going back to your case study, it's a mutual fault. It's a fault at a very high level. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the fault of smaller entity, because in healthcare, people do mistakes. And especially in innovation research, people do mistakes. So it's the role of governance to make sure they don't allow speedy processes. They don't allow any, medicine or machine to be deployed without very highly process that do testing and quality assurance. In COVID-19, we had actually to go the opposite way. We allowed companies to deploy vaccination without even proper testing. Was that the case? I don't know. I need to have more information to know whether that machine has been deployed because there is a circumstances. In that case, it's ethical. In that case, because the community will perceive it to be ethical, so it's ethical. But you tell me there's casualty, I will tell you it's ethical. Because we are in a force measure, we need to take force and decisions, so we have no other option. But in all other cases, I would say it's unethical. It's government requirement.
Right. I think it's something very important that both of you touched on. One of it was how big corporations actually have an influence on government themselves, right? So where we are saying, yes, it is the responsibility of the government to bring out these frameworks, ensure they're taking companies to task if something goes wrong. But at the same time, the standards that we are talking about in industries may often actually be dictated by these big corporations. And I think that is one flip side of capitalism, particularly in countries where there is democracy, for instance. You've got lobbying that happens, and a lot of the funding that comes for these political leaders are from these big companies. So then how do the government's role really stay neutral? How does it really impact the smaller companies? Maybe Dr. Hazem first.
Sorry, when you were talking, I was just thinking, the problem with this in the health industry, it's really difficult because they actually influence the democratic countries, and they have more influence on the third world countries actually
Yes.
because they have more power on this. So if they have more power here, they have power on the democratic ones, more power on the third world countries. So actually there is nothing you can do unless you have someone on the government who is really ethical, and he is not influenced by whatever they actually give him
Right.
for or not corrupted in another way. Let me put it this way, and this is the only way I think it's. So I don't know whether this is answer the question because when you were just talking, I was just thinking about this. So what was again the?
So this is exactly our point. Like, how do we, if we are saying government bodies are the ones who are responsible for ensuring companies follow ethical standards, yet the governments themselves are being dictated, or the standards are being dictated by the bigger companies who lobby. How does that impact smaller companies, or like you mentioned, companies in different countries? And I think you've given one of the answers.
Yeah. I think yeah. No, as I said, I cannot think about anything else. About it will depend definitely on the person's ethics. Plus, the government has to put some more regulations, strict regulations, in order to prevent this. And but still, people are weak sometimes when it
Right.
comes to money. Let's be
Yes.
realistic.
Yes, Dr. Kamal.
Well, again, it can be either positive or negative on smaller companies. Positive that they take advantage of what's being deployed in terms of policy, and they will follow the track of bigger companies in terms of violating, let's say. It would be as well negative in terms that they are the small player, and they are the player who will not be allowed to be a big player. And then you use the policies to prevent them from growing
Right.
and start penalizing them to do it. Big player always go, how can I say, always go away from even violating ethical standards. They always find a way. They have the power and the
Right.
money and the lawyers to fight and win or even pay. But they survive.
Yes.
Smaller company, if they violate any ethical standard related to health,
Right.
they can get smashed. They either don't have the money to pay penalty, or they don't have the power, or as you move on. So it
Absolutely.
can be either positive or negative on smaller
those
cooperation.
companies. So coming back to you, because you were the one who discussed this, this point about governance and how important it is for governments to play that very crucial role. Given what you've heard from our experts, what are your thoughts now about the government role?
I agree with them. It's just that the government has set these standards, and I think it's also important that it's not just about setting the standards, but making sure they follow it. And I think that's where most of the issues start from. That's where
Right.
all these incidents have happened because they haven't made sure that these standards were followed. It's not that they weren't in place. So I think that's something to think about.
Think about. All right. So given now that we've discussed all three angles, we've talked about it from the employee's perspective, from the company's perspective, and the government perspective, maybe I'll come back to the expert speakers. From your experience, what are the other types of dilemmas that you have seen project managers face, and how do they overcome this? Maybe Dr. Kamal first.
There's many dilemmas you can put the project manager in. Whenever you step to an uncomfort zone, or you try to promise a product or a project that you haven't done it before, you're already in uncomfortable dilemma. Is that ethical to is it ethical for an organization to step into for healthcare and you've never done a project in healthcare, before? Again, this is a question as well. Other dilemmas can be whenever it comes to risk as well. You know, there are many risks that might happen which trigger a lot of problems. And that put as well the project manager in a big dilemma on responsibility. Did he do the proper job in triggering, identifying, mitigating, putting a proper plan for health and safety? That would be the major dilemma I would be concerned as a project manager. Whenever it comes to health and safety, all other dilemma are manageable, but the health and safety dilemma would be something critical.
Critical. Dr. Hazem?
I would tell you actually one of the in project management, if you don't have the right team who's got the right skills with you, this is one of the biggest dilemma. And this always happens when you are working in projects. Companies will come to you. If you're working for a company, they would tell, okay, we've got this stuff and this is a team and you have to use them. So guys, I mean, this one here doesn't have any experience in this area or little experience and I need someone expert. They said, no, okay, we were going to mentor him. We have someone else who's going to mentor this person. Actually, he's working on other projects. He's busy. And you have to manage this guy as much as you can. So resources, training for resources is really important. You are as a project manager, my advice, when you get into this situation, you have to fight to get the right people with you. If you don't have the right people, your project is a failure. That's, this is in addition to what Dr. Kamal said.
Fantastic. I think I'll throw the word corruption into this mix and see what we hear. So we know, of course, there is corruption at every level, wherever you go. We've heard this, we read about cases. But when it comes to IT project management or engineering project management, what is the kind of corruptions that we do get, what does happen behind the scenes where project managers are concerned? Dr. Hazem?
Corruption in what sense?
Corruption could be embezzling money, working with a substandard, supplier, etc.
Yeah, I will tell you one of the corruption which usually happens in project management, especially in the engineering. And IT, I'm sure that is some as well. Let's give one example here, one example here. And when you are working, for example, as a consultant and you are leading a project and you design a city like this, and then you have to design a system which you may use some pumps or use some of the tools which you require for building this infrastructure. So you will actually, people will come to you and say, okay, can you specify our equipment? We need to put this specification in there. So they can, give you some gifts and sometimes bribe you, give you money in order to specify this. And it happens, when we are as a civil engineers, when we design wastewater treatment plant, for example, people will come to you with the equipment because we have lots of electromechanical in this area. So they will come, okay, look, we've got this, this is a new equipment, will save you a lot of energy, save you some cheaper than other equipments and so on. We would like you to approve it and put it on the, as one of the equipment which we can, they can use in the tender. So you are as a project manager, if they give you some money and you are ethically not really right, you may accept this and just to go ahead. With the IT projects, it happens, for example, with the servers. Assume that you're working in a project and then they come to you, you have to specify some servers. No, we're going to use a cloud, and this cloud in Amazon, these clouds, server clouds in other parts of the world. Yes, and they tell you, okay, specify us, and we will, if we take this project, we're going to give you, say, 2%, 1%, or give you some, sometimes they give you cars and so on. And it happens all the time. This is ethical?
Dr. Kamal?
Again, corruption, you wouldn't prevent corruption. Corruption can be in the mind itself,
right.
In the behavior as well. You can get corrupted. If you create the environment that can increase corruption, it will happen. Even if you are very ethical, if I get influenced by a lot,
Yeah.
unclear facts, I might start to get corrupted without even me knowing
Through
that
knowing
I'm
about
being corrupted. So corruption will always be there. This is my point of view.
Right.
All what you need to do to prevent it, make sure it's very clear, very tight. Processes are very clear, very tight. Incentives are there for
Yes.
people. People need to be to give incentive for people so they don't get corrupted. Incentive doesn't have to be only money,
Money,
all the time. This is my line of thought about it.
Right. Just coming to girls, knowing your experience with project management projects that you have done, what are your thoughts in terms of bias or backstabbing? Then I'll come to the experts. From the perspective of being a team member, what are your thoughts on this?
Especially when we have friends in a team, there can be bias and backstabbing. Sometimes they don't contribute as much and we can't really. So I have experienced that, and
I think it's expected. Like, I think you should have that expectation that it's going to happen. But it's about how you deal with it, I guess, when
Right.
it happens.
Okay.
To assume that it's not going to happen is not nice, because it can lead to your project to fail. So having those expectations and working around those is more important.
The same as Sanskriti said, we have also gone through the same things. Some of them might contribute too much, some of them might contribute less. But at the end, it's all the same.
Right. So now that we've heard the student perspective, coming to actual practical world, do you think that still applies?
Bias can happen at a higher level.
Right.
If you belong to an organization where the organization is a functional organization, you get biased to your function. So if I belong to the IT department, I will be biased to the IT department. Even if we have a common platform, a common project that all of us need to achieve at the same time, I will always be biased to my IT
Yes.
department. So to break that bias, that's why you teach them in project management, we move from functional organization to projectized.
Right.
We need to be more project-oriented, because by being project-oriented, you'll forget about the bias being biased between ourselves, and our target would be the project itself. And the reward will be for all of us.
Absolutely. Dr. Hazim.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dr. Kamal actually. Bias is always going to be there, okay? Unless you reach to a level where you can recognize that this is not going to work. And myself, I did it once in one of the projects, I was just got one, they asked me to get someone to be in my team. Oh, I needed someone to be in my team. I actually looked at the people in my department first. Yes,
Yes.
yeah, it is. I mean, I have the choice. I'm a project manager, so I'm selecting. So I selected the ones which I know that she was one of the good people, and I know that she's a hardworking. So yes, I've taken her. Biased, but in a way that, just it will help my project.
Right.
It might not be, because I didn't really look around, but I know that because I know her, so I trust her. And this is a problem when you manage projects. That sometimes you work with the people you trust more than the people, although trust and qualified, but could be some people more qualified than these guys, and you don't take them. So you really have to be careful. And after this, I've learned the lesson. Yes, it was really good. I mean, she did deliver. But after, thinking about it, why did I do that? I should have looked at other CVs and selected maybe better one. Although she did a good job. But yeah, it's lessons, when you are working and start, working in the project manager. In order to be a good project manager, you have always to assess yourself and see the mistakes which you've done and learn from these mistakes. This is the only way to be a good, to improve your skills and be a good project manager.
Okay, so I think with that, we are at the end of this segment, and we will move to Vidhi for the Q&A and the Twitter.
Thank you, Dr. Zeenat. I think that was such an engaging and insightful session. So let me move on to Twitter to address some of the questions. So we have Meena who's asked, she says that project managers always aim for higher profits. Is there a way for managers to manage the demand of keeping up with competition and increase the company's profits while also following ethical behavior?
You're giving me the hard question. Wow. Again, competition is always going to happen. Part of success is to create competition. And without creating a competition within the team, within the project managers, you cannot achieve better results. So again, Hala, the second part of the question, am I being unethical if I compete for higher profit? No, I wouldn't reckon. So competition is something demanded and recommended all the time. And it's nothing ethical about competing for me being more wealthy. Right. But again, in line of that, I need to make sure I'm not breaking ethical issues. Yeah.
Our next question is from Sami Sheikh. He says that we need to identify issues in project management, and what are the reasons that we're not able to do so?
I'm going to give you the hard
We need to identify the issues in project management. What are the reasons that we're not able to do so?
Why aren't we able to identify issues?
No, I will tell you something, because each project is unique and each project is different. Sometimes you're working in a project which is, you haven't done before, so it is difficult to check. To predict some of the issues, not all the issues, but in most of the projects, we actually know what are the problems we're gonna face. But very, very little things can, we can miss in this, in identifying. Similar, what happened in the during coronavirus. No one, I doubt that maybe 5% of the projects, they only identified that could be some shutdown, crisis of shutdowns all over the world. 95% they didn't. They couldn't predict it, and this is part of the risk. That's what we do when we do project management. We have risk management templates where we have to define the risks and how we're gonna manage these risks. But with other issues, most of the issues now, because all documented, we know about it. If you read, you will find that this has been identified. Okay?
So we have one more last question. This one is from me. You spoke about bias, right? So my question is, how can project managers overcome overconfidence bias or optimism bias when they're managing projects, with regard to taking decisions that are more ethical?
This is a hard one. Wow. The glory of achievement is always going to create that dilemma of, I'm good. I know how to do it. That's why in project management, we teach that you cannot always use the top-bottom approach in all your decision making. Many decision making, and especially in time estimation, cost estimation, and even scope estimation, organization usually use the bottom up or the top down approach, and then they go to a win-win situation. So as long as you in your company you're trying to integrate those two approaches, you will make sure that the project manager is not going to live the glory all the time. So maybe the people or the employee themselves, they came with a better decision than him.
Do we have time for maybe one more question from the audience? No? You're all good? Okay, I think this was a fantastic discussion. As I said, we were really excited that we were coming back face to face after 3 years of being online. I think Vidhi and I were really sick of sitting online and doing this session because it does bring in a whole different dynamic when we're actually having a face-to-face panel discussion. I think the student speakers were fantastic. You guys brought in really amazing case studies to the discussion that carried the discussion forward for the whole hour that we've had. Of course, Dr. Kamal, Dr. Hazem, your expertise and your experience from the industry always enriches any discussion that we have, particularly this one that we've had in terms of project management and what are the duties or responsibilities of project managers. And I think if I just had to sum it up, I would have to say that we want to ensure that project managers remain objective, irrespective of where they are, what their sizes of the company is, what the, the political environment might be, protect the interests of all stakeholders, not just their own or just the company, but also the employees and the customers in the cases of the gaming industry, and of course the data breaches that we've seen. Get leaders to act for the project's benefit. In that way, I think we also remove the bias that happens or the perceptions that come across, because now we're looking at the project as the primary entity, and everybody, every sector kind of works for the project. Get the right level of authority needed and assigning the right responsibilities, identifying those right people who can do the work, and not just giving something to somebody who might not have the right skills or favoring someone who might be in your team. Using the right processes, and of course helping each other and following the guidelines and ensuring the guidelines to exist to begin with. With that, we would like to definitely thank, of course, our student speakers, and a huge round of applause for Dr. Hazem and Dr. Kamal, everybody. Thank you so much.